I think on the whole, most fruit and veg is substitutable. And, whether it's a peach salad, but you can use nectarines and grill the nectarines instead, or, it doesn't need to be white nectarines, you can use yellow nectarines. There are very few non-substitutable products. And the ones that are non-substitutable, you'll know because they're things like avocado.
When did fruit become so fraught? Our guest today is Thanh Truong, a second-generation fruiterer and author of a new book, Don't Buy Fruit and Veg Without Me. Thanh is the self-confessed fruit nerd, that's him on Instagram, and he knows fruit inside and out, or should we say sprout to pip or skin to core, I don't know. He knows what went wrong with bananas and how to choose a good avocado, and it is great to have him on the show today. Thanh, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Dani.
So good to chat to you. Always great to connect with your joyful spirit. Tell us about life as the fruit nerd. What do you do day to day?
Well, I am a second-generation wholesale fruiterer, and I get up very early in the morning, like 2 a.m. in the morning, and that's when all the fruiterers come to the central markets around Australia and in Victoria here. And all the fruit stores come, get their produce, and go back to the stores and set up before everybody has even waken to the morning sunrise. So I'm basically in connection and talking to the growers every day, receiving stock, turning over stock. But my work as the fruit nerd is my passion to educate consumers to eat better, because I believe that good food starts with good produce.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more, and we love talking about produce here on Dirty Linen, but also on my producer's podcast. It is so important, but it feels like fruit is an area where things have gone a little bit awry. I mean, what have you seen over the course of your life? What's different for you now as a fruit eater than it was perhaps for your dad and your dad's dad?
Yeah, well, I write in the book that, not just half a century ago, 50 years ago, consumers and the way that Aussies got fruit and veg was vastly different to today. Farmers had a much stronger connection to consumers. Seasonality was a real thing because there weren't things that the industry hadn't developed all year round supply. And so the connection that we had to fruit and veg was very different. We often ate what was in our backyard or grown in our suburb or nearby, and we didn't really have the variety that we have today. So understanding the lessons of history will allow us to understand what our food system is like today, and hopefully a way in which we can hope to change it in the future, whatever that may be. And my book goes in detail in terms of how I'd like the world to change, and that is for consumers to start using their senses again to pick good eating produce, not necessarily the best looking produce.
I mean, we are so conditioned to look for, the perfect apple, the paragon tomato, the banana that looks like it's from a storybook. I mean, why have we been trained like that, and how do we start to unpick that training?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, and the real answer to that is it's twofold. So we, in lieu of our lack of knowledge of what will taste good, we overuse our senses, which is our eyes, and our basic instinct is to look for something that isn't ruined or isn't molding or broken because it might have insects in it or for whatever reason. So we overuse our eyes as the stimuli to pick produce. Now, over time, not just the supermarkets, but fruit stores and anybody that's involved in the industry have leaned more towards that, have then pushed and pressured growers to have more grading, have more pesticides, have more of a process to eliminate ugly looking fruit. And over time, the supply base and the consumer base has led us to this point in time now where all produce is graded uniformly so that we have the same experience when we go into the store. But that lack of knowledge just continues today. And so to unpick that, we need to empower ourselves with the knowledge of what is actually happening to a piece of fruit. Now, I don't know about you, Dani, but when I walk into a fruit store, I treat and I feel as though the fruit and veg is alive. Do you have that feeling?
Oh, that is a really good question. Honestly, it depends where I am. I'd say if I'm at a beautiful farm gate, I would say yes. And if I'm at the supermarket where it's under the lights and it's all racked up uniformly, even that it's got those little shapes for the fruit to nestle in, where it has to fit in its clothes or it doesn't get on the shelf, I feel like I don't have that being to being connection. So I'd say it's contextual.
Right. I like that. I love that. And that's, the environment in which we shop definitely changes our mood and how we see things, right? But from a fruiterer's perspective, imagine you're standing, I grew up in a fruit store and I used to run down the aisles and cause all kinds of trouble for my parents. But, I watch as bananas come from green and turn yellow, and from turn yellow to black within one day, or leafy veg that is bright in the morning become very whittled at night. So as a fruiterer who watches your produce become that perishable and almost to waste within days or or maybe even within hours, the thing that I hate most is food waste. Because we would see it more than anybody else. People might think that, yes, we've got, 30% food wastage in our fridge and in our pantry, which is true, but it's nothing like watching produce basically die. So for me, fruit is alive, and I respect it in that way. And so when I respect it in that way, I like to use all of my senses, not just my eyes, but my nose to smell if things are telling me to eat it. Sometimes to knock on certain fruits like watermelons to see if there's a crack in it or a bruise in it. Or to even use the sense of sound for a durian where, you can tell if it's mature or not. We can use our other senses like weight. So if something is heavy, certainly something like an orange or a mandarin, there's going to be a less opportunity that mandarin or orange is going to have a dry pulp, which is called granulation. So I've just mentioned basically 4 senses without having taste, because obviously you can't eat it and then buy it. I wish we could have that, but that's how I see the world. And so my fruit nerd passion comes from having the connections within the industry to find the answers first and foremost as a consumer and then as a fruiterer.
Wow. When you talk about it like that and that fruit being alive and changing so quickly, the job of selling it feels suddenly very urgent, that you really need people to come through, to trust that it's going to be good, to pick it up and buy it that day and hopefully use it quickly as well. It's actually quite demoralizing to think about, that you know that this stuff is spoiling before your eyes. Of course, sometimes it's ripening and just becoming at its very best, but it's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because as consumers, we also expect, we don't mind if there's perhaps a section out the front of discounted fruit, but we want everything that we see in the store to be absolutely perfect. And we do have this unrealistic expectation that we can just, think abstractly, come up with a recipe in a shopping list and go in and find whatever we want any time of year. It's a real struggle to find a meeting place between expectations that are sometimes unrealistic and the realities of stocking a shop that looks bountiful but isn't prone to wasting half the stuff on the shelves.
You're right. And, you said a few things there that, really pulled my heartstring, which is most people or most of us will shop for a recipe and the inflexibility of the ingredients, the inflexibility of, maybe for some reason cauliflower is not doing so well and the recipe has cauliflower and, it's easy to substitute that with broccoli, but in the moment people might not be thinking about that, or they might be thinking this is not going to work and they don't have the confidence in the kitchen or for whatever reason. But shopping for a recipe for me, I think, is one of the things that 50 years ago it was done, but not to that extent. My parents walked into a fruit store or they had a fruit store, but they'd walk into a supermarket, say, and when something was looking good, they would check to see if it was good quality. And, most of the time it would be maybe in good value. And they would purchase based on what was good in the moment, not good as a recipe. And I think the reverse is of that today, where we're too inflexible to our ideas and also our skill set, so that when we walk in, we're not taking advantage of maybe something that is in season or maybe something that is good in that moment. And I have the great example of right now, blueberries are the best I've ever eaten in my entire life. And I am an absolute obsessive compulsive person when it comes to blueberries. They're great in value and they're eating phenomenally, except it's not blueberry season. So it's just an anomaly that there's been a very strong warm winter and that all the blueberry bushes are flushing right now. So for somebody to kind of say, oh, let's go eat blueberries in summer, that's probably likely not going to be the case now, because those bushes are now very tired. And so when it comes to summertime, they're going to be yielding less crop. And so I always think of this idea of the produce of the moment. And I don't believe in seasonality for that reason, because I believe within a season, there can be good periods and bad periods depending on the weather. And that's very hyper-focused. But I think that if you think in this way, then when you walk into a fruit store or wherever you purchase your fruit and veg, whether that be supermarkets or a farmer's market, you'll start to use your senses more, and you'll start to have confidence that you're going to walk in and you're going to find something or the best thing that there is at that moment, rather than listening to a generic seasonally promotional produce line, which is more used as a marketing term, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, and blueberries are an interesting example. I suppose there's a couple of things, like Australia is massive and produce does travel far and wide. So we do have different seasons in different parts of the country all at once. Blueberries particularly, I guess a lot of people suddenly planted blueberries and there's probably too many blueberry farmers. So I don't know, that's probably got something to do with it. I have been buying blueberries by the truckload right now because they are really good. So Tan, let me ask you, I've got a puzzler for you, and this is something, that's happened to me in the last few days. My kids love apples. They've been asking for apples and I haven't been buying them because I know that they're not in season. I know that the ones that are on the shelves now have been, preserved in sheds with, I think it's argon that they use to reduce the oxidation. Like, what's your position on some of these technologies that give us fruit all year round? Am I allowed to buy apples for my apple-loving kids?
You certainly can. And it's not argon. Argon is what is used to preserve wine. It's a reduction in the amount of oxygen in the air. So the air that we breathe has about 20% oxygen. And in these cold storage facilities, the oxygen is reduced to about 1%. So the respiration of the apple slows down. So if you think of it as a hyperbaric time chamber, it's slowing down its breakdown. I spoke to the CSIRO, and part of me being the fruit nerd, I love to talk to the specialists, whether it's Agriculture Victoria or, a researcher. The CSIRO have been really good at trying to explain a lot of these kinds of technicalities to me so that I can understand it as a fruiterer and give confidence to consumers. Now, apples will not lose any nutritional value beyond 9 months or up to 9 months, and then it loses some nutritional value beyond 9 months. But in terms of the eating experience, there will be, every month that it's kept in cold storage, it's going to start to lose some of its crunchiness. It's going to start to lose some of its moisture. And for me, the zing, which is that sour, crunchy pop that you get. But, in my opinion, I believe that most apples eat good for about 6 months after harvest. So the harvest period is around April to May. So you're probably going to start to see the drop off in quality around now. And I always say that it's a dramatic quality drop here in Australia because of the fact that we are heading into spring and summer, which means mangoes, stone fruit, cherries and all the berries. And so apple consumption does decrease a little bit, but then also the quality does decrease. So your children can still eat apples. Our children can still eat apples. And the fact that we do have them available is, you know, we take it for granted every day. And, you know, even though this romantic notion of seasonality is lost, I think sparingly eating it, but appreciating the technologies that have been developed so that we can have an apple pie when we want it, that's still something to celebrate, I think.
You've talked about that confidence when people are shopping to a recipe, and it made me think of another story I've done recently about Vic Market and chatting to one of the seafood traders there, George Malonis. He spoke about the difference now compared to a few decades ago when people would come in, they'd buy fish for the week for a larger family, they'd buy 4 kilos of whatever was looking good, and then they would just do something with it. Whereas now people are coming in with their recipe for 2 people or for 4 people. They know they want kingfish and they want 400 grams for their recipe, and it's just a completely different way of purchasing. And I think that's sort of what you're pointing to with fruit as well, or fruit and veg. I mean, is that part of what you're trying to do with your book, is to empower people to regard the produce in front of them and respond to it rather than walk in with a fixed idea about what's going to end up in their shopping bag?
Absolutely. And I liken it to cooking. You know, I only really started heavily cooking when I left home, and as a newbie, you don't feel confident in the kitchen. You heavily rely on the recipe. And then over time, as you cook more and more and more, you start to get a little bit of confidence, and you start to get a little bit of, the fear is lost in terms of, adding, I'm just going to add salt as I go and sugar and not worry about it and just taste as I go. And the same is when you shop. You know, if you're only aware of eating bok choy, then you're never going to experience the whole spectrum of Asian leafy veg. And I'm so strongly passionate about this because the brassica family is so large, yet bok choy still takes up 80% of all of the consumption of Asian veg. But there is no fear in trying another veg that only will cost you $1 or $1.50. The worst thing you're going to have is one meal that you don't like the leafy veg part of it, but it could open your mind. And I'm not talking about like pak choy or like choy sum. You know, you can go for something completely out there like water spinach, which is in my book, which is one of my favorite veg. Or go for like Chinese cauliflower, which is marketed in different circles as collini now. They're all just substitutes. They're very similar. And I think on the whole, most fruit and veg is substitutable. And, you know, whether it's a peach salad, but you can use nectarines and grill the nectarines instead, or, you know, it doesn't need to be white nectarines. You can use yellow nectarines. There are very few non-substitutable products. And the ones that are non-substitutable, you'll know, because they're things like avocado, which you're not going to find another avocado to spread another fruit on your bread. So I hope that the book is able to give consumers a little bit more confidence, a little bit more background, and some real science and practicality to some of these tips, which a lot of the time are just generally myths. But if you understand the science behind it, you really understand the fruit's anatomy, its physiology, what's happening to it as it's breaking down, and how it was harvested from the tree, and the best ways to actually eat it as well. Let's talk about avocados, because you are the man to chat avocados with. So I know that you used to work as a buyer for Coles, and you bought like a third or something of the avocados in the whole country. So I feel like you've probably tasted more avocados than most of us. They are such
a love-hate fruit. You know, you want them, but you open them up so often they are not good. You're just scraping around the bruises. One of my kids is so fussy. If there's, you know, a hint of a bruise, the whole avocado is anathema to her. What do we need to know about avocados?
Yeah, thanks for that description. Yes, I did eat a lot of avocados. I did purchase a third of Australia's avocados. And in doing so, I purchased avocados from Queensland, from New South Wales, Victoria, Tri-State region, Western Australia, New Zealand. It was small sizes, large sizes, reeds, avos, hass, wurts. And I must admit that when I first started eating them every day, for quality control purposes, of course, I didn't know what to look for. But when you eat something every day, you become very sensitive to very small changes in the produce. And so in this case, I could definitely tell avocados that were more nutty and oily than others. And it came from this very specific moment where we had run out of very large size avocados, which is usually called a count 18, 20 or 23, which is 18 in a tray. And the smaller size avocados, which are half the size and they're usually pre-bagged. And the small avocados were very green and I could never get them to ripen up, even with the best of my abilities and with the entire distribution center managing it. And it was because of what I was told is nutty flavor, and I determined that nutty flavor comes from the nut. Now that sounds so obvious and stupid, but nobody ever actually thinks it. I'm so sorry to say that. It sounds so silly, but it's so true. And when you cut an avocado in half and look at the avocado, you can see that the closer the flesh is to the nut, the more yellow it is. And the further away the flesh is from the nut, it gets closer to the green skin, which has that very herbaceous leafy flavor. So there's two kinds of flavors in an avocado, the oily nutty flavor and the kind of earthy tone. Now, small avocados have a tiny nut or seed, very minimal contact to it. And so they generally always eat far greener. And when I mean greener, it's almost like the flavor of an unripe avocado. Have you ever cut an avocado that's been unripe before, Dani?
Oh, always. And you're like, surely this is going to be okay. It feels a bit firm, but that's going to be good. It's going to be good. It's going to be, oh no. And then there's nowhere to go with that, right?
That's right. Yeah. Now the tip that I can give all consumers is that all avocados in Australia are ripened, which means that they're picked green and then they're put in a room and there's ethylene in the room and it's been heated up to about 18 degrees, because at 18 degrees, the fruit will absorb the ethylene and the plant or the fruit will then start its maturation process, which is the ripening process. So that's before any of the fruit even hits the market or the shelves. So by the time it hits the shelves, it's starting to get soft. Now, the problem and the issue that we all have is that we squeeze around the waist of the avocado, but that's inadvertently bruising the avocado for when they become ripe. So if you pick an avocado that is slightly firm or hard and that you know somebody who's picked it up wouldn't have squeezed it because it's firm, that avocado is going to be soft within 24 to 36 hours. Or even if the weather is really cold, within 72 hours, it's going to be ripe because it's already been set off. But if you pick an avocado that is soft already, there is an extremely high chance, and the avocado industry did research to show that nearly every piece of ripe avocado on the shelf has been handled 10 times by a consumer before you actually buy it. And so that is why when the avocado becomes ripe, like really soft, and you pick a soft avocado in the shop, because we want to eat it that day, of course, we have that terrible experience of it being bruised and a bit, sploshy inside. So my tip is to purchase avocados for the next day or the day after. Now, if you must buy an avocado for that day, which most of us will want to, then gently touch the top where the stem area is, because if you only touch that area, that's the only part that's going to be gently bruised. But also, that is the furthest point from the nut. So if that part is a bit soft and gives, then the entire fruit is ripe.
Yeah, but what about the other 9 people that already squeezed it?
Well, yes, you want to pick one that is slightly not too soft, right? So it's still a little bit firm. So anytime that you pick something that's going to be very ripe, it's most likely going to be mishandled, unless that fruit has only just hit the shelf and it's already ripe.
Okay. So I think I'm going to have to get them from underneath.
If you get them from underneath, you'll never have a bad experience, because nobody has ever touched it since it was packed into the tray. And when it was packed into the tray, it was firm. So that's my tip for avocados. So I hope everybody...
This is the information that I need.
Well, Dani, I've got a great line for you, and it will prove my fact. All of the restaurateurs and the chefs that receive avocados in the restaurant, I would bet $100 that not one piece has ever been bruised, because nobody's ever touched any of that fruit in the trays. Whilst the ones that you purchase in the stores, they are bruised. So, that's a good question for you to ask next time if you really want to get down to the avocado business.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have actually wondered that, because, obviously there's smashed avo, there's lots of avo in sushi, and you just think, how are these guys dealing with the trauma of opening up their sad avocados? But maybe, yeah, they're not. They're having avocado joy every day of the week.
Avocado joy, I love it.
There's just one last thing I want to touch on, and that's bananas. Every time I eat a banana, I just cannot believe that there is a food that is so amazing and so different from other foods. Like the texture of a banana, like how are we so lucky as humans to be able to engage with that?
Oh, I write in the book that the Cavendish banana, with all of its issues, is the most underrated fruit in society. And it's because that 100 years ago, and even now, I recently went to Melbourne University to pick a cool banana, which is an African variety from the palm. And literally it was green turning yellow. And the next day it was yellow turning black. And the day after, I literally had to freeze every banana. But for some reason, the Cavendish can last so long. You can put it in kids' lunch boxes. It can rattle. It can withstand the rigors of cold temperatures and warm temperatures. And then, as you mentioned, it's got such a delightful texture, and it will make your body sing. I mean, it's the best campaign for a fruit that I can remember. We are so lucky to have the banana, especially the Cavendish banana. And we take it for granted because it's always there and it's always ready. Whilst everything else is kind of, a bit of hit and miss, maybe besides apples. Apples and bananas are, the most convenient fruits for us to eat. They're great for us nutritionally. They taste good. But, we don't see them as being exciting anymore because they're just there every day, right? So I definitely am bringing back that love for bananas and apples now that you've asked me.
Well, I reckon, I can chat to my mum who remembers eating her first banana when she was in England, and what a revelation it was and how exciting it was. Almost like the whole community would gather around to look at this wonder. It's like, when the platypus made its way to England, in someone's, lab coat or whatever. It's just it is pretty extraordinary. I know there are a lot of issues with bananas and, plantations and disease, and we could talk about that for hours as well. But I reckon let's finish on a positive note with an appreciation for bananas and also the perfect avocado, because there is no joy like avocado joy.
There is no joy like avocado joy. So thanks, Dani, for having me. And I hope that consumers can just, have the knowledge to feel confident when they walk into wherever they buy fruit and veg, and see fruit and veg as alive. And I think that they'll have much better fruit and veg experiences.
Yeah, we'll love that. And you're certainly helping people along with your book. So, yeah, look out for it. Don't buy fruit and veg without me, Truong. Awesome to have you on the show. Really appreciate it. And, yeah, catch you soon.
Thanks, Dani.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtyLinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.